Om. Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sah Veeryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So, just a recap of the last class. We had started from verse 30. Until verse 30, we have seen that from verse 11 to verse 30, after Arjuna's breakdown and complete surrender to Lord Krishna, Krishna starts talking about Atman in a philosophical way, according to the Sankhya philosophy. And he tries to convince Arjuna by saying that Atman is everlasting. He gives the qualities of Atman, which is like ancient, which is eternal, and which is changeless. And because of all these things, Arjuna, there is no need for you to worry. After that, we understood that Krishna could sense that there is no kind of reaction in Arjuna, or rather, Arjuna is responding to the way Krishna wants as per his teaching. So, as a good teacher or as a good doctor, when we talk him as a psychiatrist, he understands the patient well or he understands the student well. In that sense, he automatically now shifts his talking or his preaching from philosophy to practicality. Now he comes back to Arjuna and asks, Arjuna, what's your duty? Who are you? And what is that which is your Swadharma? And we also understood that the word Swadharma will be used throughout Bhagavad Gita in almost all the chapters, I can say. And Swadharma here refers to the natural inclination or the tendency that we have to do a work, and which is very much aligned to the nature and which gives us complete happiness. So, how can we know whether we are doing Swadharma or not? If you take any kind of activity that you feel like doing, and while doing it, and yeah, after doing it, not expecting the monetary or any other things, but you feel immense happiness from inside. So that is the work that we need to take upon. So he being a Kshatriya, his duty is to fight, because it's not just because he is a warrior by birth, but he had been a warrior in living. From the childhood, he has been trained in archery and he had been enjoying fighting. If he has, and we also saw that here the four varnashramas are not because by you don't get it by birth, but the varnashramas are coming in terms of mental temperaments. So when you take the by birth also, Arjuna is a Kshatriya, and when we take his mental temperament also, he is also a Kshatriya, because from his childhood he has been interested, inclined, and felt happy about fighting and winning the wars. So he started asking, so what is it, Arjuna, and what is your tendency? And he says it is, he doesn't say, but he knows that it is his archery or his uh, Kshatriya dharma, which is to fight. And now he's saying that he wants to go away in the mountains and he wants to go and do renunciation of his fighting and lead a life of a jnani, which is not in concurrence with his swadharma or his natural nature. So he is trying to adopt paradharma. And Krishna warns here that look from the angle, leave looking at the angle of death. Now start looking at the angle of performing action. What is that you have to do? And we have gone through many examples of understanding Swadharma. And we also had a takeaway point as parents that let's not push our uh, child or children into the things just because we are interested in it or we did not do certain things as per our likings. Give them time, give them or hear to them in understanding what really makes them happy. At the end of the day, as parents, what we are looking for is their happiness. And when we take a Bhagavad Gita and read, we understand that happiness and peace of mind comes in various steps. And for kids, not forcing them and letting them take the work or the course which they like to do the most and they enjoy to do the most will give them happiness in the long run and also peace. And we can see in our personal lives how many of us have taken up careers not for various reasons. It could be for meeting different kinds of needs or anything, but we understand that we are not in a happy or peaceful state by doing that work. and there was a reason for taking it, but we are not happy at the end. And we also understood the concept of heaven and hell. Heaven and hell are just the mental constructs, and they are not two geographical areas. When you are, and what causes heaven or a hell? It is the feeling that we have after doing a particular action. That also we understood. So actions per se are neither meritorious nor sinful. Internal mental reactions decides the nature of our action. So it's not about again good or bad, even though you can do a good thing, but if you feel internally restless, agitated, then the action has incurred a sin. Whether if you do a bad thing and if you feel happy about it and your internal reaction is good, then you have incurred a heaven. But you might ask, like, how does it possible? These are all temporary. Every action will again has its own effect. So if you do a good action, the benefits of doing good will be borne by you, the baggage you are going to carry. So this heaven or hell is not the baggage. This heaven or hell is the mental state that you are in after doing a particular action. It will be temporary. So you if you say that I am in heaven now, or I am in sin now, meaning I'm peaceful or happy, that state will not continue forever. So it changes with every action that we perform. And we had seen till 35th shloka, where he starts saying that if Arjuna runs away from fighting the battle, all the people who had very high regards for him will start looking him down because he has withdrawn from the battle and have run away from the battlefield. Any questions till here, till the 35th shloka on the topics that we discussed last week?
No, Bita.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. So we can continue with the next shloka. Avachya vadamscha bahun vidishyanti tavahitaha nindantastava samartyam tato dukkhataram nu kim. He is continuing the same stance which he has spoken in the previous verse, and he brings it to a next level, saying that all your enemies will ridicule your strength and say that all the things that should not be said. And what could be more painful than this? Like hearing such kind of words from all your enemies who talk ill about you, that you have left the battlefield like a coward and ran away. And what is painful than you? And here to understand again why Krishna is talking these words to Arjuna, because he is making use of Arjuna's weakness to uplift him. Arjuna is a person who is very much for the power, who is very much for the praises. He cannot stand a person who dishonors him or dispraises him for his strength or for his skills that he has. So now he is trying to emotionally, because the philosophy did not work. Now coming to practicality, he is again trying to see how he can capture the emotional state of Arjuna so that he will come down and think. Till this time, Arjuna is not in a thinking state. He is still in an emotional state. That's why whatever Krishna has told, the philosophy that Krishna has said had no impact on Arjuna, because Arjuna's total state till those 12 or 20 verses from 11 to 30 was not in a thinking state, but still he is in an emotional state. So the first thing that Lord Krishna is trying to bring Arjuna to the state of thinking so that he will give it a thought. Now all these things that he's emotionally trying to say will invoke a thought process in him as what is that I'm doing. So he's trying to do that. And he now says again not the demerits of fighting the war. He first said that no one will, the people who he reveres as great people, all the Maharathas, will look at Arjuna in a way that he will be disregarded, or he will be considered that he ran away out of fear. No one will tell that he renounced, he had a compassion, he renounced because he did not want to fight, he could not take this bloodshed. They will not say. And further continuing, he saying that from Maharathas to few people to he's saying all your enemies will talk all the things that are not supposed to be talking about you. And for you, Arjuna, what is it that's more painful than this? Meaning that even if you go and sit there, you cannot be at peace when you think about all these things. So psychologically also we know, if a person has that kind of craving, for that person, psychologically treating in this way will certainly cause a lot of issues. And people who are that we see it in office, we see it in our daily lives, in our families and all. If people do not like to be insulted, if you insult, then the way they have their mental equilibrium will totally change. Now he talks about the merits of fighting the war. The past few 2-3 verses he spoke about what are the demerits, like what will happen if you don't fight. Now he is telling what will happen if you fight. Hato va prapsyasi swargyam jitva va bokshase mahim tasmaduttishta kaunteya yuddhaya krita nischayah. Death means the attainment of heaven. Conquest means the enjoyment of earth. Therefore, raise up Kaunteya with the resolution to fight. So what are the two outcomes if Arjuna is going to fight? What will be the two possible outcomes?
Either they win or they lose.
Will there be any other outcome except these two?
No.
No. So either it's a win or a loss. And he talks about both. Hatova prapsyasi swargyam. Hato is if you lose, like if you get slain in the battle. So what he will get? Prapsyasi swargyam. He will get a direct route to heaven. If he gets slain in it, jitvava bokshase mahim. If he wins, he will rule this earth. Mahim is earth. He is going to rule this earth if he wins. So he says, so raise up, Tasmad Uttishta Kaunteya, the son of Kunti. Again, the word Kunti here is to tell him that, to spike an emotional state or connect with him, that he is saying, oh son of Kunti, you get up. Yuddhaya Krita Nischayaha. How do you get up? With a determination to fight. Don't get up in a normal way, but raise up in a way that you will be determined to fight. Why you need to be determined to fight here? Because the two options or the two results of fighting is either a win or a loss. If you win, you enjoy the kingdom now itself. If he wins, the results will be enjoyed immediately. He can see what he is enjoying. If he doesn't win also, if he loses or if he gets killed in the battle, he also has a good result, which is taking a direct route to heaven. And we saw, because for a Kshatriya, we say it is Veera Maranam. Any person who dies in the righteous war as a Kshatriya takes directly to the heaven. So this one doesn't incur any sin. And that's why he says it's a route to heaven and not hell, as Arjuna has told in the first chapter, where he was telling that all these is incurring sin. So he tries to again bring up the point to tell that whatever you spoke there is not the right thing to look at. Look it from this angle of your action. Who are you? Why should you act? And what are the results of your action? And when we take the analysis from that side, this act is not going to incur any kind of sin. In either results, it's only going to incur good to you. So get up and fight with determination. So he says, both winning and losing in the battle are beneficial. So lose, he attains heaven. If he wins, he enjoys the kingdom on earth. So, any questions in this verse?
No, Vita.
Okay. So we saw a sequence of the logical statements that Lord Krishna was making. He told about his dharma. Then he told what are the demerits of not fighting a war. Then he told the merits of fighting a war. Now in this shloka, he gives the formula, how to look at things and what will make him successful. So this is a formula. Sukha dukkhe same kritva labha labhau jaya jayau tato yuddhaya yujyasva naivam papamavapsyasi. So he says, make yourself, same kritva means balanced or having an equal state of mind. Have an equal state of mind in what? Sukham and dukkam. In happiness and sorrow. Labha labha, alabham, profit and loss. Jaya jaya, in victory as well as failure. Have an equal state of mind in all these 6 things he said. The 3 dualities which he mentioned here. And because of that, engage in this great war and you will be freed from sin. So there is nothing as sin that you will incur. And what is the mental state of mind you need to have? Sukha dukke same kritva labha labhau jaya jaya. We will see this in detail. So we have seen Sukham and Dukkham. So we have been analyzing our instruments in terms of three levels. One is physical, one is mental, and one is intellectual. So where do you think the joy and sorrow comes from? What, from which state? Is it a physical state, mental state, or an intellectual state?
Mental state first.
Yes, it's mental state. And labha, alabham, profit and loss.
And physical, right? This must be.
Yeah, it's physical because you feel you need to know, like it could be a property or it could be money or anything. It's a transactional thing. So labham and alabham happens at a physical level. Sukham and dukkham happens at a mental level. And jayam and ajayam, success and failure. Where does this happen?
Intellectual.
Intellectual, because to decide what is success or to define what is failure, you need to think. You need the discriminating factor. So the success and the failure happens at your intellectual level. So he's saying from the part of physical, from the part of mental, and from the part of intellectual, you have a mental equipoise. You see all these things alike. Don't differentiate between joy and sorrow, success and failure, profit and loss for any action. You perform the action because you have to perform the action. When you start attaching yourself to the results, like joy and sorrow, success and failure, profit and loss are what? They are the outcomes of an action, right? They are not actions itself. But all these 6 phases are the outcomes of your action. So what he is saying is act with determination, having an equal state of mind to all the outcomes. And with that state of mind, you will not incur any kind of sin. So let's see a video of Gurudev ji and we will discuss further.
Understood, but it's so hard, Abhita. Emotionally, being very balanced, not feeling, sad. Anything happens at home, just if the kids are not well, or some financial crunch is there. How can we
Yeah,
live,
it's hard.
without
It's hard,
disturbing?
but it's not like impossible. So it's not like 100%. You try it out, no? See, we cannot say that it's how can we, but you try to practice and see. So as I always say, no, the subconscious wiring is such that now we become so emotional to anything that happens. First, understanding this, what we have to first do is wire your subconscious mind. Say a positive affirmation every day that I will be balanced. Try it out for a month, 2 months, until that becomes a part of your subconscious wiring. Then whenever a problem comes, if you have said this with positive conviction and faith and belief, then the way you look at that problem will be a bit different. First of all, you will not consider anything as a problem. It's just a perspective change, Renu. It's a total perspective change.
Yeah.
And it takes a time because our perspectives are formed from our prior experiences, our subconscious rewiring, and all the experiences and the things that we have carried from past births. So the perspective change is the toughest. Logic change, no need, because we already have a logic. The problem is with the perspective. If you change your perspective, the outcome will automatically be different.
Yeah.
And I think if you are really a sports person, I think the way you look at life will be totally different. That I can always vouch for.
That I agree. Yeah.
Sports teaches a lot of things. Anyone who are sports people here who can feel this?
Yes,
I'm
Abhita,
not into
fully into
sports, but
yeah,
but
I
yeah,
agree with you.
I agree. Yeah, because there are so many sports people in my family. I couldn't indulge in sports, but I see the difference. The person who is in sports and who is not in sports.
Yeah, because the perspectives, the way you look at things, as he says, like it's just a sport. When you go to a sport, every time you cannot go with an inclination to win. So it is to enjoy. So that's why they always say, don't forget about anything in the competitions. Just enjoy. Do whatever you can do and come back. And that kind of attitude in one segment of your life, and when you have been practicing that in one segment, that automatically becomes your personality and you will carry over even in the other segments of your life.
Yeah, it will become like a habit. Yeah.
Yeah. So as he says, do not let the external situations enter into the privacy of our mind. So whenever we deal with situations, try to make the mind at rest. It will not be 100% at rest, but try. We have to keep on trying. How many days,
Right.
how many years, how many lives, we don't know until we attain a
Mm.
certain stage. So play in the outer world with the mind at rest. Your intellect performs at its best, because this is not just for any kind of peace, but this formula is what leads you to success. Because when you are anxious, when you are agitated, when you are disappointed, scientifically you will not be able to do your best. But when you apply this formula, you will get two things. One is success and another is peace. You'll get both. Because when the mind is at rest, your intellect, access to your intellect is 100%. And when you are able to access your intellect to 100%, you will be able to do the best of what you can. So the recipe for happiness. So what was the recipe for happiness? Accept both sides of each pair of opposites with the same sunny attitude, or reject both sides of each pair of opposites with the same sunny attitude. It's like an equation. If you see the two sides, as Gurudev said, see, life is mixture of both. The two, it's like a two sides of a coin. It will not be a coin if it doesn't have a two sides. In the same way, if you take off any duality, we are living in this material world, and what binds the Maya or Prakriti is functioning based on dualities. When do you say something is good? What makes you feel good? Or what makes you feel success? What makes you feel success?
When what you expected happens, or what you expect out of an event, or anything, like whether it's a competition or whether it is in life also, if you expected something and that happens, then you feel happy.
Yeah. Can we say it as absence of failure?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say you're successful, you feel the absence of failure. When you say I feel good, it is the absence of bad that is making you feel good. So when you have to enjoy anything or feel anything, the absence of the other thing is only making you feel the presence of the thing. When you take the colors, when you say something is red, it is the absence of all the other colors, or its ability to reflect the colors and only absorb that particular color that makes to give it a color. In the same way, when both the things are not there, you cannot feel. If just it's only everywhere good, or if it's only everywhere success, will you have anything to feel for? Is there a difference for you to feel for? We will not have, because everything is the same. How do you differentiate red from blue? Because that absorbs all the colors, and or it just absorbs every color except blue, so that is blue. This absorbs all the colors except red, so this is red. So the absence of other colors makes it blue, or the absence of all colors makes it other colors except red makes it red. In the same way, in our life, when we try to accept the both sides of each pair of opposite dualities arising from the physical level, mental level, and also at the intellectual level, either accept both, and if you cannot get a mental attitude of acceptance, reject both. Meaning that see both of them in the same way. Happy? Okay. That means you might feel that, like, what, I should not feel happy at all. One thing we always need to remember, as Satchitananda Swarupam, our internal natural state is joy. So what we need to always uphold is to our natural state, which is joy. Be joyful, ever joyful. And then whenever you act, do not let the results of the action tamper with your natural state. When your natural state is not altered, you will not have any kind of mental agitations. So our mind will be at peace when you either accept or reject. And we will not have fear. And for what we will not have fear? We will not have fears of failure. We will not have desire for victory. We will not have sorrow for any kind of losses. And we will not get anger for any kind of rejection. And we will, moreover, focus on what we are expected to work. Think of the situations in your life. If you have wanted something and tried really hard for that particular thing, and you got it in your life, When you lose that particular thing, how will you feel? What will be the intensity of losing that particular thing to you?
Feel very upset and sad.
You feel very upset and sad. For example, the same thing, you were not actually very inclined of getting it. You got it as in a lottery. Take it, for example, you got it in a lucky draw or something. And if you lose that thing, both are the same objects, meaning that it is also the same object. But at this time, you did not really try hard for it. You got it in a lucky draw and you, sorry, you lost it. At that time, will you feel the same kind of sadness or disappointment, or will it be less or more?
I think it will be less. It will be lesser
Because
because you did not put so much of effort or behind it, and it was not your life's ambition only to get it or something like that.
yes,
It just came
so
to you because of luck and good luck or fortune or whatever.
so this we can many times feel in our life that when you try hard for something and get the attachment towards the thing or how we are getting it actually defines how you feel when you lose it. If you have got it with a lot of effort, you really feel sad when you lose it. If you have not put so much effort and you feel okay to lose it. So this is coming because we have just seen one side of it. So when we try to accept both or reject both, then our mind will be at peace. And because of that, we will not have fear, we will not have desire, we will not have sorrow, and we will not have anger. And literally, these four are the mental agitations that we have when we do the things that will not make us very successful. And here, with this formula, what will happen? We work just because we have to work. That's what he said. Be determined to fight. Just because you have to fight. Show determination in your work. Only in your work, not in the outcomes. The four things or the six things he said. Sukha dukkhe same kritva labha labha jaya jaya. So he's saying, determined to fight. You don't have, or you have a balanced state of mind in all these six outcomes. Then your determination will help you not to incur any kind of sin. And what is going to happen when you do this is work itself becomes a purpose. We are not looking at the results of the work. All these six things that we saw at the physical level, mental level, and intellectual level are the outcomes of our actions. So when we are equanimous or balanced to the outcomes of our action, our work itself becomes our main purpose and not the outcomes of our action. On the surface, if you see, you might think that this is very boring. If you follow this, there will be no joy or fun or excitement in my life. But try it out and see. When you feel the experience out of this formula, and when you really try to feel them, you will see whether this recipe is a boring recipe or this recipe is something you can always piggyback upon. This has to come from trying, because just because I say, it might not seem appealing to you, but this is the logic behind the thing, because restless mind is the reason for many things. And when we make our mind peace, we will be able to be at peace and also be successful. This has to come from your experience. Just by mere reading of this, if you see that, oh, I have to be the same in my success, in my failure, then means I should not feel at all. Then how will I work with enthusiasm? How can I work with things? We will see in Karma Yoga how you can work with the complete enthusiasm by not getting attached to the results. But in a nutshell, he tells, or he concludes in this shloka saying that leave attachment to the outcomes. Just do the battle, fight for the sake of fighting with determination. And here are few quotes, I just put it. The mind is like water. When it's turbulent, it's difficult to see. When it's calm, everything becomes clear. When we see a water which is very turbulent, can you see? When it is like with lot of ebbs and falls, or with lot of tides in it, will you be able to see what is inside the water? It could be a river.
Oh.
We cannot say. Yeah. So, but when the water is really calm and the water is clear, then we will be able to see. It might be so deeper also, but still we will be able to see what is there inside, because it is that calmness that is making it clear to see. Calm mind brings inner strength and self-confidence. So that's very important for good health. Leave away the rest of the things, but working towards it, first thing you achieve on a physical level is good health, because you will not get hormonal imbalances. Your stress hormone will not raise much. You will not have the cortisol levels abnormally raising and falling, which will result in the tampering of the production of other hormones. So it could be thyroid, it could be diabetes, any kind of hormonal related problems, particularly for women, for PMS or whatever it could be. All these can be regulated when the stress hormone in our body is well under control. So this is one of the first advantage that we can see when we follow this formula. When the mind is calm, you get inner strength and self-confidence. First thing that will give you a good health. Any questions in this? Or any thoughts you want to share?
Abhita, I just have one doubt.
Yeah.
So you're saying that both in that is, we have to have a mental equilibrium. We have to have a mental equilibrium while we're doing any activity, without thinking of the result or anything. Just be joyous and continue doing your work. But even for that, even that thought that yes, I should be happy while doing this and I should not expect any results, isn't that also a desire? Isn't that also a particular desire? And in case we don't follow it, say for example, you get attached in the process of doing that work, you get attached, or the result of equilibrium is not happening, won't that cause disappointment, or because we are doing this, as you said, that affirmations, we have to keep constant affirmations that my mind is going to be calm. I'm not going to expect anything out of the work I'm doing. I'm just doing it because it is the work. It's my duty to do. Isn't that itself desire? That is my only thing. Isn't that?
Yeah, exactly. That's a nice question. Yeah, we will see it in the third chapter. When we have to act, the chronology is that, I think I'll show you in the next verse. The chronology is that from vasanas, we get a thought. From thought, we get a desire. Because of desire, we will be acting. So there is not even a single second that we can stop acting. So there cannot be a single second where we are desireless. But what kind of desire you have? Now, desiring to be happy and peaceful is a sattvic desire. Whereas attaching your desire to the results of the action is a rajasic desire, which creates more restlessness. Because we are not all in the state of sattva or sarpas sattva, coming to that state immediately is not possible. So as a formula in Karma Yoga, when we come to desires, what we take away is that never have tamasic desires, reduce the number of rajasic desires, and increase the number of sattvic desires. Your attachment will be there. You will feel disappointed, but still you will work towards making it a happier thing, which will actually give you happiness. So that is a sattvic desire, where you want or pushing yourself to a selflessness or non-attachment to your own personal results.
Thanks, Abhita.
We cannot go away from desires.
True. Thanks, Abhita. So this means even monks and people who have taken sannyasa, even they are having desires. The desire to stay calm, desire to be desireless. So everybody
that's what they'll say. Everyone will have certainly desires. That's what he says when we come to the rest of the chapters. So even there is a shloka in 8th chapter, which I'll just touch upon because you asked this question. There is a shloka which says upon Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasat jnanat jnanam vishishyate dhyanat karma palatyagaha tyagat shantiranantaram. He says in the first verse that Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasat. Normally we say that practice is always better. But in this verse, Lord Krishna says all the contradicting things. He says that first thing is knowledge is better than practice. But until this time, as a common people, we always know that it's better to practice rather than to read and always get a knowledge. But what here Lord Krishna means is that whatever you do, if you don't have clarity about your action, it goes waste. Any kind of ritual, any kind of thing, whatever you are doing, when you are in a spiritual path or in a normal life, you should know the reason why you are doing. What do you get out of doing? I do it because I do, or someone asked me to do, my parents told me to do. In that context, he says that knowledge is better than practice, because just practicing for the materially or mechanically doesn't give you anything. And second, he says, shreyo hi jnanam abhyasat jnana dhyanam vishishyate. Apart from the knowledge, more than knowledge, meditation is better. So meditation is better because meditation brings you focus. It's not just because knowledge is not important. With the knowledge, you will be able to go into the path of meditation. So meditation, if you have to go into the path of meditation, you have to first control your mind, meaning it should be a single pointed thought. That's why meditation is better, because it controls your mind. And finally, he says, normally in all the things till now we have said liberation, meditation is the ultimate. But here he contradicts, saying that renunciation of roots of action is better than meditation. In which context, even when you sit for meditation, if you think that I am meditating to realize God, that will pull you down. That will pull your success rate down, because even in meditation, you are attached to the results of your action without focusing on your action. And that's why renunciation of roots of action is the most superior one in any action you do. Now you understand? Knowledge is also an action, or practicing also, meditation is also an action. Finally, in any kind of action, you have to be separated or detached from the results of it. Even it could be a meditator, we don't know their mental state. But if that person is sitting with an outcome, with an outcome oriented action, then that is not a superior action, or the action performed in the path of karma yoga.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Deepika. Is that why we say Sarvam Krishna Arpanamastu at the end of?
Yeah. See, everything is same. God, work is worship. So they'll say work with an attitude of Ishvara Arpanam. So when you work in the attitude of Ishvara Arpanam, what you get back is always Ishvara Prasada. So accept it. When you go to a temple and accept any kind of prasadam, you will not crib about it, right? Today, why did I get lemon rice? Today, why did I get tamarind rice? Today, why did I get curd rice? Will you have any kind of cribbing, or will you take it with reverence, and even though you like it or not like it, that one mouth, will you take it with reverence and eat it?
Yeah, reverence, with reverence and yeah, happiness.
Why is that attitude coming? Because of the attitude you have internally, that the bhakti you have inside it, for the place, or for the significance of what you are getting in the temple. So if you cultivate the same attitude in your action, you work and offer your work to God. Give work as worship. That's what we say, work as worship. When you give your work as an Ishvara Arpana, what you get back is Ishvara Prasada.
Right.
Have that attitude, then you will not have any kind of mental turbulences. That is the thing that we'll see in Karma Yoga when we talk about the techniques of how we should do. But ideally, yes, Suma, we cannot get away from desires. When we say desirelessness, it cannot be. That means we have already got mukti. We will not be in this world.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So any person have to act. Any other questions? If not, I'll just go with the next verse. Yesha te bihita sankhye buddhi yoge tvimam shrunu buddhya yukto yaya partha karma bandham prahasyasi. So here now, till the previous verse, he has finished telling about, he told what is his dharma, why should he act. He next told what are the demerits of not fighting. He told what are the merits of fighting, and he told what is the formula to fight without a sin. Now he is continuing with a more emphasis on Buddhi Yoga. So he's saying, till now, I have given you the reference of self-knowledge. That is Sankhya, Sankhya Yoga. Now you listen to Buddhi Yoga, which I am telling you. When you do Buddhi Yoga is nothing but performing your actions in the spirit of Karma Yoga. It is nothing but acting in the spirit of Karma Yoga. So when you act in the spirit of Karma Yoga, what is going to happen? You will not be bound to your actions, in the sense that you will not produce more and more desires from your action, which we will see very clear steps in the third chapter. So what he is saying, now listen to the Buddhi Yoga that I am going to teach you to get rid of all the bondages of the action. So Sankhya means sequence of logical thoughts arriving at a rational conclusion. So we saw, okay, these are the aspects of Atman. Atman is like this, like that, like, and all. And finally, we concluded that nothing will happen to Atman because it is ancient, it is indestructible, it is ever present, and that is ever pervading, everlasting, and all. That's why it has no death, or it has nothing to do with the action that you are doing. That was the Sankhya philosophy, rational analogy, and the conclusion that we arrived at. Now, Buddhi Yoga is the context, means Karma Yoga, the path of action. So, how when you act, you can be in the not be in the bondage of action. And what is this bondage? We will see it clearly in the Karma Yoga. Capability to choose. Choosing of our thoughts, choosing of our emotions, choosing of our feelings, and choosing of our reactions and responses. We are the only one in this universe who are endowed with this capacity to choose. None of them have. And that's why there should be a difference when we have this discriminating capability. Let me continue with this verse. Neha vikramana shosti pratyavayo na vidyate swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. He further continues, on this path. What path? The path of Buddhi Yoga. Effort never goes to waste and there is no failure. Even a little effort towards spiritual awareness will yield protection from the greatest fear. He is trying to give a kind of statement saying that normally when you work, and so when you climbed up 10 steps, and when you fell down from the 10th step, what you have to do to go to step 10?
Get up and again start climbing.
Start going from which step?
From the step where we have fallen, I mean, like where we are.
Yeah. So suppose you have fallen back to step 1, you have to do a walk up again from step 1. So because you were at step 10 and you fell down at step 1, you cannot automatically start from step 10 or step 11. But that is the normal path in this materialistic world. Whatever we do, if you fail again, you have to restart from the start. But in the path of spirituality, in the path of Karma Yoga, what is outlined here is that there is nothing that will go waste. Even 1% of attempt. Suppose you have not succeeded in this path, but you climbed till step 10 and you fell down, still you will be, when you start up this path again, your start will be from step 10 and not from step 1. He is trying to give us that confidence or a kind of encouragement that in this path there is nothing as some that you put an effort and it is going waste if you do not succeed. Success or failure is immaterial. You will always be going above and above in the route, and this will finally protect from the greatest fears in our life. So this is a story of Ajnamala. If any of you know about the story of the story?
Arjuna Bala, what did you say?
No, this is Ajamila. They call Ajnamala also. They say, like, here the story is that there will be a guy who would actually initially he would be a kind of a very good person or a Brahmin who comes from that family. Then in the meanwhile, because of the lust, he will be with many girls, and finally he will be in a state where he will lose all his health, and he will be in the state where he will be about to leave his body. And at that time, I think one of his son's name is the name of Krishna or something. I think I don't remember it completely, but at the time of something. So at the time of dying, he will try to call his son.
Yeah, I heard the story. Yeah. His name is Narayana, yes.
Yeah, and he will be liberated. This is just a story to hint that, not to take it in the actual context, but this is to hint the thing that was explained in the previous verse, that the effort that you put in this path will never go waste, and you will continue from where you have left when you take up the path again. So even though he had been in these bad things and all, before he has been in the path of spirituality, again he left, and at the last, when he tries to call his son's name at the time of death, still he continues his spiritual path. That's what is the example that is given here. And this is the state that I was talking about. Because of vasanas, we get a thought, and because of thought, we get a desire, and because of desire, we act. And when we say an action in karma yoga or buddhi yoga, when you say I'm acting as per a buddhi yoga or I'm acting as per karma yoga, that means this action will lead you to an actionless state, meaning it, when you don't attach the results of your action, you have nothing to give and take. It will not produce any kind of additional desires. It's like going to a shopping. You went to the shopping center having five things in your list. You go, you see things which are on sale. They might not be needed for you at this point of time. Your shopping list now becomes 5 to 10. Among the 5 things, you bought only 2 things because the other were not there. So you come out, your shopping list now has 8 things to buy. So what did this action give you? This action did not lead you to an actionless state. It added more desires. And when you add more desires, you have to do more actions. When you perform actions in the spirit of karma yoga or buddhi yoga, we will transcend our desires. That means for whatever you have acted, it is done. With that, no more desire comes, and there will be no need to act more. We will learn this in detail in the chapter 3. And as we take actions, we have 3 types of actions that we generally talk about. One action is performed with unselfish desires. One is performed without desires. One is performed with selfish and egocentric desires. Let me take an example of myself. I am now taking up these classes. And depending upon my intention of why I am taking these classes, if I am performing this class because I want to gain some popularity, I want to gain money or anything, then this is an action. This action is good. Teaching, spirituality, then this action is a one that is driven with selfish and egocentric desires. Suppose I don't have any personal motives, meaning that I need to gain money or I need to become popular, but still I have like, I want people to attend to my class. That is not a selfish desire. I want more people to come to the class because I'm not benefiting in any way if less people come or more people come. But still, it is an unselfish desire. I am like over obsessed that everyone who attend my class should benefit from this class. All of them should change. It's unselfish, but still a kind of attachment. And if I perform this class or take this class without, I come here for the sake of coming, as we said, determination just in the action. I'm just teaching because I have to teach. No other things. 1% comes, 2% comes, 3% comes, it doesn't make a difference. And whatever you take away from the class doesn't make any difference. In that class, I'm performing duty for the sake of duty, not being attached to any kind of outcomes that comes from teaching. Do you understand the difference?
Yes.
Of the
a
three
bit.
types,
Yeah.
types
Yes,
of
yes.
actions that we see. So in the karma yoga, the spirit of performing is to perform without desires. That is called the karma pala tyagam that I said, and that's what is also stated in the previous verse, where he says to be having that sukha dukkhe same krutva, the same thing, with performing without desires. Because these two, in a way, see, performed with unselfish desires, when we take it is for good only. I'm just thinking about you all to change your lives, or to, it is still good. But still, if I feel that, okay, today someone of you did not take away anything, or you did not change in spite of me teaching this much, or if any kind of thing I have, that will still make me restless. And that's not again going to be the one, as what Swamiji also said, that's not an intelligent action because it's giving me restlessness. So any action we perform should be an intelligent action, in the sense it should not give any kind of mental agitations. And it is about Abu Ben Adam. So he was the king of Balak, and this poem gives the kind of the same thing. So the poem goes like this, like Abu Ben Adam is a person who always used to serve the people. He never went to temples, he never prayed God, or he never worshipped God, but he always served the people. So when an angel, he sees an angel with a book, and the book of gold, and in that Abu Ben Adam asked, what do you have in this book? And the angel tells, so these are all the people who I am nominated for as the persons who are dear to God. So he will ask, do you have my name inside that book? She says, no, your name is not here. Then he will politely say, write me as one of the fellow men. Then it's like the angel is going to take that book to the Lord, and Lord is going to choose the people he likes the most. So these are all the people that this angel nominated as the people who are dear to God by seeing various activities they are doing. So Abu Ben Adam tells the angel to write her name, and she writes and goes. So it goes, and the next day night, the angel comes in and tells to Abu Ben Adam that he gave the list to the Lord, and the Lord has chosen him to be the first name. So what does this imply is that merely going to a temple or merely going to that is not actually worshipping an idol is not what takes you near to the God, but it is serving your ideal. It's not that we are not supposed to worship idols. We can worship idols, but not in the sense that just going and praying there for 1 minute in the temple for us or for whatever it is. You even do every action with an ideal being a selfless ideal, and that will take you or make you closer to the divinity within us and also to everyone. When you consider everyone as divine beings, then whom you are working for day in and day out is for the divinity or the God within each and every one of us. So this is a very nice poem I felt I could share. You could actually share it with your kids as well.